Hey everyone, and welcome back. Today we're doing a deep dive into something that I think a lot of you will relate to: navigating midlife. We're going to focus on men specifically today. We've got some source material here. Um, Visualizations and stats that were designed for a webinar about midlife coaching. I'm really curious to see what kind of insights we can get from all this, even if you're not a man in midlife yourself. I think a lot of these concepts are pretty universal when it comes to goal setting and just, personal growth and all that. Plus, I love a good chart.
Charts can definitely be very insightful.
Yeah.
And the one we're starting with here, this life quadrant chart, is a really good starting point for understanding some of the common struggles that men can face in midlife. It breaks down life into 4 key areas: career, relationships, health, and personal growth. Pretty simple, right?
Yeah, makes sense.
But the proportions are where it gets interesting.
Okay, so break it down for me. What jumps out at you?
Well, first thing that jumps out is the imbalance. Career takes up like a whopping 35% of this pie chart. Shows how, for a lot of men, professional life can be kind of the dominant force in their lives, overshadowing those other areas.
I mean, that makes sense. I guess my question is, a successful career, isn't that a good thing? Why is that being presented as a potential problem?
Yeah, well, it's not about saying that career ambition is bad, but recognizing that an overemphasis on one area can lead to neglecting other important areas of your life. Relationships, for instance, come in at 30%. So, the source material suggests that even when men have, their families and social circles, if there's not enough attention being paid to really nurturing those relationships, it can lead to feelings of isolation, disconnection.
So it's not just about being around people, it's
Yeah.
about the quality of the connection.
Exactly.
And that really ties into the statistic we have here about, it says something like 80% of men in their 40s feeling stuck or unsure about their next step in life. I have to admit, that's a higher number than I expected. What do you think about that?
It's definitely a significant number. And I think it speaks to this whole idea of imbalance that we were talking about. Because if if your whole identity and your sense of worth are tied to your career, it's really easy to feel kind of lost or adrift when that area is not providing the fulfillment that you'd hoped for. It's like you hit this wall and you're wondering, well, is this all there is?
Yeah. And it's almost like you need permission to even say, hey, these other parts of my life also need attention. I'm looking at this tiny 20% sliver for health on this chart, and I'm guilty of this myself. I put my own health on the back burner sometimes. Is that a common thing you see in men in this age group?
Yeah, and unfortunately, that's pretty common. Men often prioritize work, family responsibilities over their own well-being. And then they only tend to address, health concerns when they become absolutely unavoidable.
Which, let's face it, it's not the best strategy. It's so much easier to maintain good health than it is to fix things when they go wrong. There's this final sliver here. Personal growth at a measly 15%. Which almost feels kind of symbolic, doesn't it? Like after career, relationships, even just basic health maintenance, there's not much left over for personal exploration and growth.
Yeah, and it's a great observation, and I think it really speaks to the importance of being intentional about making time for things that bring you joy, things that help you grow as an individual. It could be anything from, pursuing hobbies, learning new skills, engaging in some kind of spiritual practice, anything that really nurtures your sense of self outside of those more externally defined roles.
This chart is making me think about my own life, and I'm not even in my 40s yet. It's a good reminder to check in and make sure that all those different areas of life are getting at least a little attention, right?
Absolutely. This visualization, it's not meant to be something that makes you feel guilty or judged.
Yeah.
It's a tool, self-reflection. Identify potential areas of imbalance, and then think about, what little adjustments you can make.
Speaking of adjustments, our next visual here, midlife journey curve, takes this idea of, this potential dissatisfaction and kind of maps it out over time. And this is really interesting to me because I'm guessing it's not a straight line to happily ever after.
Oh, no. No, it's not a linear progression. It's more like a bell curve.
Yeah.
There are 3 distinct phases that men will typically go through during midlife.
Okay. I'm picturing it. Where does the journey usually begin?
So the first phase is it's from roughly ages 40 to 43, and it's labeled early stability. It's a time when a lot of men are, feeling pretty content with their careers, their family lives. They've achieved a level of success and, things seem to be going well.
So there's a but coming, right? I can feel it.
You're right to be suspicious, because even in the midst of this stability, there are often seeds of discontent that start to sprout. The demands of work and family life might start to feel heavier. And then those areas of, health and personal growth that we talked about that we're neglecting, they might start to, kind of nag at us. It's like a little voice whispering, is this all there is?
And I'm guessing that little voice gets a lot louder in this next phase.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
From ages 44 to 47, we enter the phase of midlife questioning. And this is where that sense of unease often intensifies. You might start to question your career choices, feel restless in your relationships, or, your energy might dip. Your overall well-being might decline a bit.
It's like all those imbalances from that first chart are starting to catch up. That feeling of being stuck that we talked about, that becomes more prominent, right? And that's where the statistic about career changes comes in.
Exactly. 50% of career changes happen between the ages of 40 and 50. So this is a time when a lot of men are actively looking for a deeper sense of purpose, a deeper sense of fulfillment, even if it means, making big changes in their professional lives.
So it's not just a job hop, it's a deeper reassessment.
Right.
Okay, that makes sense. What about the people who don't make a drastic career change? Are they doomed to stay in this questioning phase forever?
No, not at all. The midlife journey curve eventually takes us to the third and final phase, reinvention. And this phase usually begins around age 48. It goes from there. This phase is all about, more clarity, a renewed sense of purpose, and really importantly, improved well-being.
So it's not necessarily about finding all the answers or, having perfect balance. It's more about going through this process, this questioning process, and coming out on the other side with a more authentic sense of self. That's actually pretty hopeful.
Yeah, it is. The source material emphasizes that this period of reinvention can actually be really empowering. You take stock of what really matters, let go of, old beliefs or expectations that aren't serving you anymore, and you can actively create a life that's more in line with your values and aspirations as they are now.
So this is all making a lot of sense. I imagine, though, that it's not always easy to go through these transitions on your own. Is that where this idea of midlife coaching comes in?
Yeah, exactly. Remember that statistic about how achieving goals is much higher when you've got that accountability like in a coaching relationship?
Yeah.
Well, that's where a coach can come in and be really helpful. They can help you navigate, the emotional ups and downs of midlife. They can help you get clarity on your goals, help you come up with a plan to achieve them.
Okay. So we've got this overarching view of this journey, and we've talked about how coaching can play a role. But how do you actually translate these big concepts into action, into doing stuff? I'm looking at this next visual here called the goal-setting pyramid. And it looks like it's trying to offer a more concrete framework for actually creating change.
Yeah, this pyramid really breaks down the process of setting goals in a way that can lead to real transformation.
Hmm.
And what's interesting is that it doesn't start with actions or outcomes. It starts with something much more fundamental, values.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me about this values-based approach to setting goals.
So the idea is that even before you think about your specific goals, you've got to be clear about what really matters to you. Like, what are your core beliefs? What kind of person do you want to be? What kind of legacy do you want to leave behind? These are big questions, but they're the foundation.
It's about connecting your goals to something deeper than just the outcome.
Exactly.
It's got to be aligned with your sense of self.
Yeah. And a coach can be super valuable in this process.
Yeah.
Because they can help you uncover those values and articulate them in a way that you can actually use to make decisions.
And I can see how that'd be so helpful when you're in a time of transition like midlife, when you might be questioning a lot of your previous assumptions and priorities and all that. So values are at the foundation. What comes next?
So the next level is priorities.
Yeah.
And this is where you start to translate those values into more concrete areas of focus. And this is where that first chart we looked at, the life quadrant chart, can come in handy. You can look at it and ask yourself, am I prioritizing my career at the expense of my relationships? Am I neglecting my health because I'm so focused on work and family?
So you're using the chart as a tool
Exactly.
to kind of assess how well your current priorities are reflecting your values.
Yeah. And misaligned priorities are a major contributor to burnout. And we've got data here that shows that men over 40 experience burnout at a rate that's 30% higher than their younger colleagues.
Wow. That's huge. It really highlights how important it is to be intentional about what you choose to focus on, especially as you're dealing with all the demands and responsibilities of midlife.
Yeah, it's about making those conscious choices. Choices that are going to support your well-being and that line up with your values, not just reacting to pressure from the outside.
So values lead to priorities. What is at the very top of this pyramid?
At the top is goals. So these are the specific, tangible actions you take to move towards the life that you envision. But the key here is these goals aren't just random. They flow directly from your values and priorities, which helps to make sure that you're actually moving in a direction that has meaning for you.
So it's not just about dreaming big. It's
Yes.
about breaking those dreams down into things you can actually do. Smaller steps that are based on what matters to you. That makes a lot of sense. It's like building a ladder to your ideal life.
I like that analogy.
But each rung of the ladder, you're choosing it carefully based on your values, your aspirations.
Yeah, and again, coaching can play a big role here because it can help you set goals that are meaningful but also realistic. And then having that support and accountability can help you stay on track.
That brings us back to that statistic about achieving your goals, right? 70% of men who work with a coach say they have more clarity in their goals after just 3 months. That's a pretty good argument for getting some guidance in this process.
It really is. It shows how powerful it can be to have a partner in that reinvention process. Someone who can give you honest feedback, help you overcome obstacles, and celebrate your wins with you.
I like that idea of a partner in reinvention. It takes the pressure off knowing you don't have to figure it all out on your own. Okay, we've covered 3 visualizations here. They give us a really good framework for understanding the challenges and the opportunities that come with midlife. But we have 2 more visuals here that I want to explore. The time-energy balance grid and the coaching impact pathway. These look like they get into some really practical strategies for making positive changes.
Yeah, those are great visuals. I'm excited to dig into them with you. But I think this is the perfect place to take a break, and then we'll pick back up in part 2.
Sounds good.
I'll come back. Let's keep going with these visuals. There's one here, the time-energy balance grid, that has really caught my attention. Seems like a really practical tool for understanding how we use our time and energy, which are our most valuable resources, right?
Yeah, big fan of practical tools. This is something I could see myself actually printing out and using. So how does this grid work? Remind me.
All right, so picture a simple grid, 4 quadrants.
Okay.
The horizontal axis is time, goes from low to high, and then the vertical axis is energy, goes from draining to recharging.
Got it. Okay, so 4 combinations. Low time, recharging. High time, recharging. Low time, draining. And high time, draining. What would be some examples of things that would fall into each of those?
Okay, well, think about things that you do that give you energy, but they don't take up much time. Maybe it's a quick workout or a short meditation, or even just a few minutes listening to music you like. Those would be low-time, recharging activities.
Like a little boosts you need to get through the day. I'm feeling better already just thinking about those.
Exactly. And then there are things that are both energizing and take up a significant chunk of time. So those might be, spending the weekend on a hobby that you're really into, taking a vacation with people you care about, or maybe working on some creative project that really gets you in that flow state.
Yeah.
Those would be high time recharging activities.
That's like, those are the experiences that really fill you up.
Right.
Leave you feeling refreshed. Okay, so what about the draining side? I have a feeling those quadrants are a little too full sometimes.
Yeah, unfortunately. So low time draining activities are the ones that don't necessarily take a lot of time, but they can really zap your energy.
Okay.
It's like scrolling through social media endlessly or, getting sucked into arguments that don't matter, or dealing with administrative tasks that you just keep putting off.
Oh, yeah.
All those little energy suckers.
Those are the things that make you feel like you're just spinning your wheels and not getting anywhere.
And then there's high time, draining,
Oh,
which are the things that take a lot of time and drain your energy.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Often these are obligations,
Yeah.
commitments that we feel like we have to do, even if they're making us feel resentful and totally exhausted.
Yeah, like work meetings that never end. The endless pile of laundry. Or, maybe even certain relationships in your life that are just more draining than they are supportive.
It's a good point. What's draining for one person might be energizing for someone else.
Right,
It's really about understanding your own personal patterns
right.
and then making choices that are in line with what you need.
So how does this grid play into this whole midlife reinvention idea? Is it as simple as just do more of the good stuff and less of the bad stuff?
It's a little more nuanced than that. It's not about getting rid of all the draining stuff, because honestly, some of that is just part of life. But being aware of how you're spending your time and energy can really help you make more intentional choices. Maybe you can delegate some tasks. Maybe you can set some boundaries in certain relationships, or find ways to make those draining things a little more efficient.
I'm starting to see how this could be really helpful for preventing burnout, which is something we've talked a lot about in relation to midlife. Men over 40 experience burnout at a much higher rate than their younger colleagues. So this grid feels like a tool for addressing that, being proactive.
Exactly. Burnout is often the result of chronic stress and energy depletion. So consciously shifting your activities more towards that recharging side of the grid can help you build up resilience and then reduce your risk of burnout.
This makes me think about that 30% higher rate of burnout for men over 40 compared to younger guys. Is it just age, or are there other things going on that might make them more vulnerable to burnout?
That's a great question. While age could definitely be a factor, I think it's probably more about the responsibilities and pressures that can come with that stage of life.
Mm-hmm.
Men in their 40s and 50s are often, at the peak of their careers, which can mean working long hours and feeling a lot of pressure to perform. They might also have families to support, aging parents to care for, and a whole lot of financial obligations. It's like they're carrying a lot on their shoulders.
And that weight can feel even heavier if they're not taking care of themselves physically and emotionally. Do you think societal expectations play a role? Are men just less likely to ask for help or to admit when they're struggling?
Oh, for sure. Traditional ideas about masculinity can make it hard for men to be vulnerable or to seek support. They might feel like they have to be strong and stoic, even when they're feeling completely overwhelmed. And that can create this really dangerous cycle where they keep pushing and pushing until they just can't anymore.
They're stuck in that high time draining quadrant
Exactly.
with no way out. But it doesn't have to be that way.
No, it doesn't.
We've talked about coaching, and it seems like this grid is a tool that could be really helpful for men who are working with a coach.
Sure. A coach can help you identify those draining patterns. They can help you explore the reasons why you might be doing those things, and then help you develop strategies for creating a life that feels more balanced and more energizing. Plus, they can provide accountability and support as you're making those changes, which is really key if you want to make those changes stick.
Makes sense. It's like having someone in your corner helping you navigate those tricky parts of the grid,
Yeah.
creating a path towards well-being. Okay, let's move on to that last visualization. Coaching impact pathway. I want to see how this one brings everything together.
All right. So this pathway basically lays out the typical journey that people go through when they work with a coach. It shows how coaching can actually lead to real change in your life.
Okay, walk me through the steps. Where does it start? It starts with self-awareness. It's about really getting to know yourself, your values, your strengths, weaknesses, your patterns, and your aspirations. Understanding what motivates you and what you want to achieve.
That sounds a lot like the foundation of that goal-setting pyramid we talked about.
Right.
You got to have a strong understanding of yourself before you can start building anything meaningful.
Yeah, it's all connected. So from that foundation of self-awareness, we go to the next step, which is goal alignment. That's where you start setting those specific goals, the ones that are in line with your values and what you want your life to be.
So not just any old goals.
Right.
It's about choosing the goals that actually matter to you, the
Mm.
ones that fit with the life you want to build.
Yeah. Moving away from what other people expect of you and defining success for yourself.
I love that idea. Defining success on your own terms.
Mm-hmm.
It's easy to get caught up in what we're supposed to be doing, but this pathway is about taking back control. So we've got self-awareness and then aligning our goals with who we are. What's next? All right, so next is where the rubber meets the road. Actionable change. This is where you start putting those goals into action, creating new habits, making systems to help you stay accountable, making real changes in how you behave.
This is where having that coach is super helpful. Having someone to keep you going, help you with roadblocks, and celebrate the wins with you.
It's true. Change is tough. And having that external support makes a big difference in terms of sticking with it and seeing those goals through.
And that's where that 65% statistic comes in, right? The one about people being more likely to achieve their goals when they have someone holding them accountable, having someone in your corner who believes in you.
Exactly. It makes a big difference.
Okay, so we went from self-awareness to setting goals that match who we are and then taking action to make it happen. What's the final step?
Results. This is where you start to see the payoff for all your effort. Maybe you feel more fulfilled in your career.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you've got stronger relationships. Maybe your health is better. Or maybe you just have a greater sense of purpose and meaning in your life.
It's like everything's falling into place. And it's not just about the external goals, it's the internal changes too. That boost in confidence, feeling like you're in the driver's seat.
You said it perfectly. The real magic of working with a coach is that it helps you achieve your goals, but it also helps you become the type of person who can achieve those goals. It's growth, not just checking things off a list.
I'm inspired. Makes me want to hire a coach right now. So we've covered a lot in this deep dive. We looked at 5 really useful visualizations and a bunch of interesting stats. They all paint a pretty clear picture of the ups and downs of midlife. But we haven't really talked much about the webinar itself that all this material is for. What's it trying to teach people? It really is like all this is setting the stage for this webinar. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
It's like they're saying, hey, we get it. Midlife can be rough, but it doesn't have to be a full-blown crisis. There are ways to deal with it. So let's talk about what they're actually trying to teach in this webinar. What are the main areas they're focusing on?
Well, the source material lays out 4 main themes. First one is the crisis of confidence in midlife.
That takes us right back to that 80% statistic, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The one about men in their 40s feeling lost or unsure about what they should be doing with their lives. Sounds like this webinar wants to help men get past that feeling of doubt, help them figure out what they want for the future.
Right. It's about acknowledging that those feelings are common, but they don't have to run the show. It's about taking control and realizing that you still have choices. You can still shape your own life, even with all the changes that come with getting older.
That leads right into the next part, career pivoting and finding purpose. We know from the stats that switching careers is pretty normal at this point in life, so I'm guessing the webinar gives some advice on how to do that successfully.
Oh, yeah. It probably covers things like exploring new career options, figuring out what skills you already have that you could use in a new field, and ultimately finding work that has more meaning for you. And I think it's important to remember, this isn't about getting a fancier job title or making more money. It's about aligning your work with your values and what you're passionate about.
I like that. I think we all want that, regardless of our age,
Yeah.
that sense of purpose in what we do. Here's something I'm wondering about, though. How does career connect to relationships? The webinar covers both, but I don't quite see the link.
That's a really good point, and it's an important connection to make. I think what they're trying to say is that when you're feeling stressed or unfulfilled in your work, it affects everything else, including your relationships. You might be more irritable, you might be less patient, less present with the people you care about.
So basically, if you make a positive change in your job, your relationships could get better too.
It's definitely possible. And this part of the webinar is probably about learning how to communicate better, setting boundaries, and building those deeper connections with the people who are important to you. It's about recognizing that relationships are a key part of a happy life, just as much as career and health.
Speaking of health, that's the last area that the webinar covers: health, energy, and well-being. It's something that's so easy to put on the back burner, especially when you're focused on work and family.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think this part probably uses those tools we talked about earlier, the life quadrant chart and the time energy balance grid. It's all about taking care of yourself, dealing with stress, and making healthy choices that are going to help you in the long run.
Like that saying, you can't pour from an empty cup.
Exactly.
You got to take care of yourself before you can take care of anything else.
It's about shifting from that reactive approach where you wait till something's broken to fix it, to being proactive and taking care of yourself every day.
So putting it all together, this webinar sounds like it's giving a well-rounded view of how to handle midlife. It's about those feelings of being stuck, finding work that's meaningful, having good relationships, and taking care of your health. It's about stepping back, looking at what's really important, and making choices that fit with your values and what you want out of life.
That's a great summary. And what's cool is that even if you're not in your 40s or 50s yet, all of this still applies. It's never too early or too late to think about what you want your life to be like. Set some goals that excite you and make a plan to reach them. Personal growth is a journey. It's not a finish line.
I like that a lot. So to all our listeners out there, as we wrap up this deep dive, here's something to think about. What part of your life could use a little refresh? What's one small thing you could do today to get a little closer to where you want to be? It could be anything. Your job, your relationships, your health, anything that feels a little off kilter right now.
Even small steps can have a big impact.
And on that note, we're going to wrap up this episode. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep searching for that balance in your life.